All right, welcome to Rapid Fire Manufacturing. Today I have Roger Atkins. He's a seasoned leader in manufacturing industry with over 35 years of experience. He is the current president of the National Tooling and Machining Association, or NTMA. He leads the efforts which supports over 1,200 small and medium-sized businesses in precision machining companies across the U.S. Roger has also led senior positions in financial services or business strategy, mergers and acquisitions, and he's helping to drive global manufacturing growth. He also has a huge advocate. He's a huge advocate for workforce development. So I see you posting about that. You're constantly promoting workforce development, which I love to see. So as the leader at NTMA, he's really helping to drive everything forward, especially here in our local community of Ohio and Cleveland. So Roger, thank you so much for taking the time to join today.
Thanks, David. Great to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know you've worked with a lot of small and medium-sized businesses. What's a key for them to stay competitive in this industry?
Well, David, my career has been, I grew up in the small to medium manufacturing. My dad had a shop, so I was in the shop at, 12 years old. So it's been a part of my life. And so, my heart is for the small to medium manufacturers. And as I tell people, I probably, now at my age, I'm the old guy in the group. And I would say I've experienced the thrills of victory and the agony of defeat in this business. It's not for the faint of heart. But, today I think, when I was a young man in the industry, you got to think we didn't have the internet, we didn't have the cell phones. So we were dependent on, personal interaction with each other. It was critical that, the only way you found out what was going on in the industry was, through an association like NTMA. That's how critical it was to be able to be with our peers and understand what's going on in the industry across the country. I think today's world, obviously, we have the internet, we have, we have the connectivity in our industry now that's really changed it. And I think the thing that's changing today is, no longer our customers in our city or regional in our area. Now, we thought it was a big deal when it expanded to the U.S. But, now we're in a world market. Small to medium manufacturers never considered themselves playing in a world market. But the reality is, I don't care how big or small you are today, you're in a world market. Your competitors can be overseas. Your competitors can be next door or overseas, and you don't know the difference, with the ability to connect with each other electronically. And so, therefore, the pressures on shops today, the pressure on shops today is just a little different. But, I contend that it's hard to make complex parts, precision complex parts, without talking to somebody, without having some kind of relationship with an engineer within your company, or a buyer who has engineering experience. So relationships are still key, but it's how you sell in a market. Used to, we had a salesperson that could go and visit our customers because they were all within a half hour of our shop. Then you could jump on a plane, but now, you can almost not see your customer today, and many people I know have large customers they've never met personally. They've met them online only, and that changes the world, and so therefore communication is much more key. So shops are forced, small or medium or large, are forced to change their communication strategy. They're forced to change how they sell to their customers. No longer can you go knock on a door. Today, you're going to have to do sales in some electronic form or fashion, whether LinkedIn or through companies who help you find customers. But it's a different day. And I think the sales portion of how we sell our services is the biggest change I see in manufacturing. Obviously, machining and technology and automation has expanded and has improved through the years. But I think the biggest challenge is how to sell your products in a market that you no longer necessarily can go knock on somebody's door and meet them.
Now, are there some steps that people can take that can help get them in the door? Or how do they adapt to the differences there?
Well, long-term relationships are obviously great. So there's shops, who are listening today that said, I've had this long, maybe a 20-year relationship with a customer, and that's great and fortunate, and we need to be thankful for those customers. But when you're starting a company or you lose a major customer due to acquisition or due to going out of business, replacing them is difficult. And today I think you have to be selling electronically. You have to have your name out there in a way that people can find you, because the reality is the buyers today look more like you than they look like me. They're young people, and and what do young people do? They use the internet. They're electronic minded. They've been dealing with electronics since they were in the baby carriage, and I mean, I see my grandkids do that. I mean, they can swipe to a cell phone in 2 seconds. Don't give them your cell phone, think they can't get into it. 5, 6 years. Absolutely. And so I think it's what we try to encourage people. You have to expand your exposure of your company. And there are, NTMA, one thing that we do, we try to bring industry partners to our members, that utilize this. ThomasNet is one of our industry partners. You can go on, and at least you can get your company exposed nationally. We work with MTD CNC with Tony Gunn. Tony helps us with videos for our companies.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to market your company, because the day of getting a buyer to come look at your shop, having lunch with a buyer is over. So you have to be able to show somebody in another state, another country, what your shop looks like and what your services are. So you have to be able to communicate your services a lot better than we used to. And so we have companies like Factor is a lead generation company. So they work on your behalf. They work as a member of your company to look for opportunities that meet your manufacturing services. So there's multiple companies out there today. It's hard to, and then, a lot of times now a position may be a social media person in your company. Who would have ever thought that a manufacturer would need a social media expert in their company? Mm-hmm. And it is about getting your name out there to the industry, making sure that you clearly articulate your services. And I think that's what, we could improve on. Make sure you know what you're good at, and make sure you know how to clearly articulate that service. And, when you have the luxury of meeting somebody personally or going into their companies and meeting, that's just icing on the cake. I mean, you can do absolutely. That, like the back of your hand. But, when you're trying to expose your company to more and more opportunities, and I think today it is, we have to have most likely more customers than we used to have.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's a really good point too. It's like you could be the best machine shop in the world, but if no one sees it, you're not going to get much business, right?
Yeah, and that's what I think. There's some great shops around the country today that need business.
Yes.
And they can make the most complex of parts. And, and you say, well, if they're so good, why would they be needing work? It just takes one change of a person. It only takes one M&A action to take your company out of bring it into another company who has its own facilities. It just takes one or two major changes to lose your customers overnight. And so, always tell people the best time to look for new customers is when you don't need them. And then, when you do that, then you can be really choosy when you have new opportunities come, you can be choosy about it. But when you're out of work, you can't be choosy. So what do? You wind up taking work that doesn't fit, that you can't make any money on, that you're challenged by. And so I always tell people, if you got a lot of work, now's a good time to look for new customers.
Yes. And now, are you seeing nowadays with everything being online, is it that certain customers there's no loyalty to their suppliers? Or, I guess I'm curious to how that transition has been.
I would think we would be lying to say there's no loyalty at all. Let's face it, when you get a good supplier that makes your parts in their own time at a good price and the quality's good, you know what? You want to keep them, and you don't want anybody else to know about them. And so we protect those guys. So I always believe that performance, the three-legged stool, price, delivery, and quality, I think that's the key to our success.
Mm-hmm.
No longer is one of the three acceptable or two of the three acceptable. There's enough choices that you got to hit all three. But I think relationships matter. As much as I talk about the electronic connection, again, I think it's hard to make complex parts without a discussion. But, that discussion only starts after you get the opportunity. And so I think selling is a little more hard from a personal standpoint. But then when you get in, I think you're now starting to connect to engineers and our people that that need to explain some stuff about their parts. Their prints could be wrong. They could, their material call outs could change. And then once those, the key is to build on those build on the ones you can communicate with. Make sure you're communicating, because there's no reason not to communicate today, as much, access we have that. So I think the key is when you get customers, make sure you're communicating to them faithfully, honestly. And, I'm a guy who, the older you get, what you find out is honesty is the best policy, because you can't remember if you stretch the truth somewhere. So start as a young person, being honest with people and communicating on a regular basis. And I think that's what protects your customers.
Yeah, no, that those are great points too. And I heard recently too, instead of upselling, it's upserving. Our job is to serve the customer, to provide solutions, to actively listen to what's going on, right?
Yeah. And again, when your customers were close to you, it was about selling. It was me beating you and you beating me on any given day. Well, that day's gone. You better be servicing your customers, because again, your customer's not your buddy across town that you can go have lunch with every week. That's gone. So you better be servicing your customer. And what is manufacturing? Contract manufacturing is a service company. We sell hours. We sell service. They give us a part, we make it. And so you better service that every opportunity you can, and look for opportunities. Your upsell is, what is this part a part of? Is there assembly? Can I do some assembly for you? Can I make other parts that connect to this part? Could I reduce your workload by, you buying this assembly, and instead of placing 5 POs for 5 individual parts, maybe you place 1 PO with me for 1 part, and I bring all 5 together. And not only all 5 together, they're assembled. Then we look for ways to upsell our services that we can provide to customers.
Yeah, and I think another important part of that too is take the sales, the commission, all of that out of your head, and you'll start performing better. Because if you start focusing on stuff like that, it never leads to good things. So I got rid of that mindset a long time ago, and it's helped out, because it's all about serving the customer.
It is, and I think that's the part of the world that's changed, David. Used to it's selling, today it's servicing.
Mm-hmm.
Because the expectation is different. They have more choices. They have more choices today than they did when I started. So when you have a lot of choices, it's about service. If you don't service me, I can like you all day long, but if you don't service me, I'll go to lunch with you, but I'm not going to buy from you.
You're right.
So yeah, I think it is a day of service versus a day of selling.
Well, and also, everyone can look up all the information, the pricing and stuff like that. So buyers have a lot more information at their fingertips. They know more about us than we know about them before they reach out to us.
Well, I would take a little different slant on that, David. I think today's buyers are not near as experienced with the products they buy. And so therefore it's much more, and that's what makes it a little of a disconnect from a relationship standpoint. When I was young, the buyers knew as much about the parts as the engineers knew about the parts. They actually knew what they were buying. They actually knew where it was used on whatever assembly it was or whatever product it was of the company. But today, most of the buyers are buying a part number. They don't know what it looks like. They don't know how big, how small, how difficult it is. And so they have no emotional connection they have no personal empathy to what they're asking you to make, how complex it is. There's only 10 people in the world can make this complex. They have no empathy for that, because they're buying a part number. And so that's why service becomes much more important, because no longer is there empathy from your buying community, knowing what they're buying. They don't know I always say they don't know if you're sending it to the moon or dragging it behind your car. They're just buying a part number. And they know what their cost structure is. And so there's where it becomes the cheapest price. And that's why we always want to get to an engineer or find somebody that has empathy for the complexity of the part and what really they're putting at risk by going to a low cost provider versus a company that can service the part, make the part on time, and a quality part, and at a competitive price.
No, that's a great point. That was a great point. Well, Roger, we are over time here. Thank you so much for joining. For those of you tuned in, stay tuned for more industry experts.
And I appreciate it, David. And I would invite anybody to be a part of the NTMA community. These are the things that we do peer-to-peer within NTMA. Thanks, David.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, buddy. Bye-bye.